Hello, world. I am not Steve Rao. I am not coming from the great city of Durham in the eighth biggest state in the United States. So I'm Shaquille. Unfortunately, there's just been a couple of technical issues. So I've started the show. I don't actually have a monologue for you, but what I would like to do is to bring on two distinguished guests, Lee Newton Rhodes and Dan Worthington. And I think we can discuss perhaps
Good morning.
some of the things we've had with our recent guests over the last week or so. We've had a former senator from North Carolina. We've had Medea, who's come on, who's been an anti-war advocate, somebody who advocates for diplomacy and peace, which I think is a great thing to advocate for. But my thoughts and feelings on that was that war is sometimes necessary. We've had Georgia Romano, who is an animal rights activist. She especially deals with elephants, and wants us to perhaps be a little bit kinder to the animals, especially in developing countries. So let's touch on some of the guests that we've had and their views and how you feel about things. I'll start with you, Dan. You think that Medea is being a little naive in her approach, but do you agree with what she's trying to achieve, even if you don't think that she's achieving it?
I think that the ideal of world peace is a wonderful thing, right? And that we should love one another. We should have peace. The problem is that there is so much division, hatred, and animosity between and among peoples, and there's so much hunger for power and control, and there's so much corruption, both here and abroad, that leads to violence and war. Now, as Americans, we believe in the concept of freedom, liberty, democracy. At least we did. And that those are values that are worth fighting for and defending around the world amongst people who are seeking to defend their freedom and territory, like Ukraine. So yeah, I agree with you, Shaquille. I think that war is typically inevitable because of mostly the elite leadership group, and they for a number of reasons. Number one, like for example, in Ukraine, the Russians are in the corner. They need the resources Ukraine offers. They need to capture the key areas there at least in order to expand their resources and their capability and access to ports and other things. So strategically, they're trying to capture those areas to be able to expand their influence. Do I think they're going to go after the rest of the former Soviet bloc? I don't think so. I don't think they have the capacity, the army, or the strength. And some of those folks are NATO allies, and so it won't happen. So to approach, yes, not when we saw Medea's stunt on the congressional reporting, C-SPAN, she basically went in and ran in a raid to professionals there. It showed me that she is incredibly naive, and that and although her message is honorable, her methods are ineffective, really.
So Dan, do you think though that at a minimum, she by pulling what you might call stunts, like she has, that she's at least bringing some attention both to her cause, to her organization Code Pink, and to herself, so that people who perhaps share her ideas might go, what, that's a group that I want to support. Maybe we can pressure government. Or do you think that she comes across as just being a nuisance? She's not throwing cans of soup at artwork, but hey, you're just a nuisance. Go away.
It's embarrassing, frankly. I mean, yeah, it's a stunt, right? It's a publicity stunt, and I'm imagining her supporters are cheering her on. But peace will only be achieved when people choose to embrace light over darkness and right over wrong. And as long as we have the level of degeneration and wickedness in the world that we have today, we will have war because the hearts of men are turned to war. And you know, if you're attacked and you're defending your family, your home, your freedom, then that is a righteous inclination, right? That's righteous war. But if but this other stuff that happens isn't motivated by goodness and bringing peace and better world, right? War is destructive. People are hurt, injured, maimed. I've been in war. It is ugly. It is difficult, and it is deplorable. You know, I suffered combat injuries. I know, and so it's you know, and a lot of people around me that I knew passed away, went to the other side. It's so war is not something to be you know, applauded and cheered on. The only thing that's defensible about it is in defense of liberty and right and freedom and those principles that we find in our country that are so important to us. I feel though that the military-industrial complex, our security agencies, our elite politicians have twisted and turned these things to their advantage for gain. And so I'm sorry. I think that if we are to seek peace and gain peace, that would be a good thing. We were well on our way. Trump had ended most of the conflicts that the United States was involved worldwide and had negotiated peace settlements in the Middle East and other things. I think they were very constructive. And, you know, Biden basically undone everything, right? And thrown us into this war for his weakness and his deliberate naivete.
Let's turn to Lee. Lee, we've talked a lot in recent weeks about the US, but we always talk about the US political process and things that should change. And some of the things that discussed with even David M. Walker is, you know, campaign financing rules. Is there too much money in politics? Now, you're somebody who's had a campaign yourself as a presidential candidate. You're also a CPA, so you have some understanding of finance and economics. The thought that the thing that people mostly are saying is that there's too much money in politics. Now, I actually recently watched a documentary. It's a little bit of an older documentary. It was made by Nancy Pelosi's daughter. And she actually had this documentary and she said, well, who are the mega campaign donors? And she actually interviewed people who were the mega campaign donors, both for Democrats and Republicans. And it was very interesting that in that documentary, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, one of the people there said, I don't think that there's enough money in politics, actually, because coming into these campaigns, they'll spend $1 billion, they'll spend $2 billion, something like that. But when it comes to drinking alcohol, they spend $20 billion a year. When it comes to, fast food, they spend $30 billion a year, that sort of stuff. I can't remember the exact numbers. And I sort of walked away from that thinking that's actually probably a pretty good point. We don't spend an awful lot of money letting candidates' messages get out there, making sure that all the candidates, especially those candidates that don't have the big names and don't necessarily have the big backing of the major parties, their voices it's very hard to get them much exposure. Do you think maybe that we should put more money into politics? Should America be spending more money on their political process and not less? And if not, how do you make sure that smaller candidates like yourself and many others actually get the exposure that they want and that they need?
I think the idea that we can control who spends what is naive. Campaign finance laws, I think, are to protect the ruling class. They can do whatever they want. As we see, they're just workarounds and however they want to spend it. But it's just for the little people, these laws. The other people, they own the press, they own the media, they'll do what they want on whatever social media platforms. So when you put restrictions on what people can spend, it doesn't hurt the ruling class, the people in power. It hurts the average Joe, that they're telling us what we can spend money on. The big guys, they just buy the newspaper, they buy Twitter, they buy Facebook, what have you, and then they just put out whatever they want. And they get free press, and they restrict what we can do. The idea that you can't even advertise or a certain number of days before an election is ludicrous. I just don't understand all these things.
Now, you know a lot of politicians in the United States, and Democrats and Republicans. I'm not a partisan in the country that I'm not even a citizen of. But
this is not a partisan issue.
I would ask the question. So I know a lot of people will say to me, "God, I wish you're American. God, I wish you were donating to my campaign and things like that." And I meet candidates, both Democrats and Republicans, and I go, "You know what? If I was there, I would put money in your campaign." Do you think that it's fully reasonable that foreigners can't actually participate? You have a very globalized economy today. If you have, for example, somebody like myself that owns a business, and I don't at the moment, but owns a business in the United States, should I not be able to have my business donate? There's a lot of criticism of that, foreigners donating through their businesses into politics. Should the international community be able to have access to the politicians?
You don't think they're doing that already?
I do think they're doing that. That's already what's happening, but there seems to be some opposition to that. Do you think that foreigners should be able to play some part, restricted part, in American politics and the American system of governance?
No, well, my point is, the reality is it's doing it already. Any laws or regulations we put in place are a farce. No one's going to pay attention to them. The gun control. Criminals don't care.
Mm-hmm.
These people, the politicians, they don't care what these laws are. There's workarounds. You can't spend money theoretically. Shaquille can't spend money, but you know what? Shaquille's got a brother or a friend or business partner that lives in America. Just give them the money; they'll spend it for him in his name.
But what I'm asking is, if a business, right, is owned by foreigners, okay, and let's be honest, a lot of those big Fortune 500 companies, big companies, do have a very significant foreign ownership, and you can't do anything about that because they're listed on the stock exchange, right? Should they be able to, if I'm a major shareholder of Disney, heaven forbid, should I actually be able to direct Disney to show its support for a particular political candidate that I like, even if I'm not American myself, don't live in America, I live in, Czechoslovakia or something? Should I be able to do that? Or do you think that I shouldn't be able to?
I think any restrictions are a farce. That's the reality. It's going to happen anyways. What are we pretending about? And what's the downside?
Well,
we want to educate people on issues, and if it's a valid issue that people care about, why don't we want to know?
Sure. Well, I think that part of the issue could be that when you have countries with much more significant populations than the United States, India, for example, has got 4 or 5 times the population. China has 5 or 6 times the population, etc. What you can have is a disproportionate amount of influence coming from some countries into your.
And we care why?
Well, I think that could be an issue.
Let's say in theory, Russia was buying massive Facebook ads in 2016 for the Trump election. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Would that affect my vote or your vote, or not your vote, but any Americans' vote? No, not necessarily. They'll look at the facts and see what's going on. I mean, why did we even go there? I don't understand.
Well, this has been an issue. There's been an issue lately, so I thought I'd ask about it. But you've made your you've given us your opinion so far.
No, you can push back. Why do you think it's a bad thing?
I'm not pushing back. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Does Dan or Sasha think it's a bad thing? They're just let people spend the money how they want and speak what they want.
There's a very important point about what you just mentioned about Russian buying ads on Facebook. Buying ads on Facebook, this is not such a horrible thing. If they want to do it, let them do it. However, what they did is much more sophisticated. They were registering a new Facebook account under American-sounded names like Mr. Johnson, Mr. Peterman, Mr. Shaquille Latimer, or some other.
Okay.
fake
famous
account.
internal
Sasha, you're not suggesting that my name sounds American, are you?
Sure. Yeah, it does.
Well,
It's
but
fine.
I'm sure there are
Yeah,
enough
I'm sure.
Latino's in the United States. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so what they were doing, they were buying, and then they were getting a lot of friends very instantly because they employed professionals, and even their address is well known in St. Petersburg and so on. Now, so they're sending some first innocent sounding messages like about cats or dogs and something else. Then they're slowly saying, oh, well, I've heard about very interesting meeting will happen on Facebook on such and such day. Oh, okay, so people who like the cats and dogs and others, okay, they registered that meeting. And that meeting, they start immediately, say, Trump propaganda or Republican or whatever they have in mind. And if you think that this didn't affect U.S. votes, okay, you definitely have right.
Sasha?
Sasha,
Akil?
they did a study recently.
Sasha, let's say everything you're saying is true. Facebook never says that Sasha Star is the real Sasha Star. Facebook doesn't say that. They don't verify everyday accounts.
I agree with you, but again, you see, Facebook is a very strange animal because in all their defense and all the materials, what I've heard so far, what they're saying, we are a platform. It's up to people how they use this platform. They want to get that or so on. Now, this is kind of it's very difficult to accept. If they own platform and in fact very successful one, making tons of money, maybe they should a little bit taking more care about what's going on with their platform. Who is
Sasha, let me just say to you here though that they did a study just recently where they reviewed some of the content that's been attributed to Russia, some of the very hard right material, and what they found was that it had a negligible, if any, influence on the election, because what they found was happening was that the people that would look at those sorts of memes and that sort of content were people who already held that view.
Are you talking about 2016 or 2020 election? Which one you're talking
about? I can't remember which election this
it's very important. It's very important because it's been proven that in 2020 they're used the same way of doing business as they did 4 years before that, and it was not effective anymore because the strategy was already wide open. People knew about that or so on. It was not.
The Democrats were doing it.
The Democrats. The Democrats, I don't think that they have so sophisticated minds that they could do something like that.
Yeah, they did. They hired a firm.
I think it's a really important point because personally, I think that we underestimate the everyday person. And I think we're also not putting enough attention into how these algorithms generally work. I was recently with my nieces in New Zealand. And they're, some of them are quite young. And the next thing I know, I log on to my Instagram account and it's making suggestions for, ice cream. It's making suggestions for ballet shoes. It's making suggestions for all these things. And I'm thinking, why does the algorithm think I'm into this stuff? And then I remembered, my nieces have been using my phone. They've been looking up all this stuff, right? So my point being that I think that when information comes out, whether that be a meme or whether that be a sort of conspiracy theory, whatever it is, it tends to be disseminated amongst people who already have that kind of political leaning.
Shaquille, yeah. Whatever you're seeing, I'm seeing, Sasha or Dan is seeing, whatever on Facebook or wherever, the media is seeing that also.
Yes,
and if the media is choosing not to respond to it, correct it, or whatever, then they're at fault.
The point I'm making, you may not pass on a meme for a politician. Let's just say, for example, that AOC, there's a meme about AOC that actually puts her in a really good light, right? I don't like AOC very much. I look at that meme and I go, yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay, you're so much better than capitalists, right? I'm probably not going to pass it on. I'm probably hardly going to look at it, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody else who actually really is a great supporter of hers goes, yeah, look, this meme shows why she's so much better and capitalists are just these evil people that are going to destroy the planet. They may pass it on. they might put it on their feed. And when they put it on their feed, the people that are most likely going to be targeted, who are going to have that come up on their wall, are probably people that hold similar beliefs or are actually interested in that subject matter in the first place.
Right.
But if you're not interested in it at all, you may not see it. The algorithm may not bring it up. The algorithms, we don't know exactly how they work, but we can kind of deduce how they work. They see what we're into, what they think that we're into, and then they, bring up suggested content, hoping that we'll interact with their service more. So let's move across to Russia and Ukraine, Sasha, but not about the war. I know you'll probably have some comments that you want to make that you didn't get a chance to do yesterday, but just in relation to Russia's interference with foreign elections. I'm assuming, based on what I'm hearing, that Zelensky is not exactly Russia's pick for who should be president. Wouldn't Russian interference in the Ukrainian electoral process be much more effective than Russian interference in the American electoral process? And so, would it not be a fair assumption that if they can't manage to get what they want in the Ukraine, that maybe they're not successful in America either?
I'll tell you, it's much easier for Russians to operate in America than in Ukraine. I'll tell you why. Because Ukrainians are very much aware of who the Russians are. This is arch enemy. And of course, Ukrainians know language. You see, all Ukrainians know and operate very easily in Russian language, but no Russians are operating in Ukrainian language. This is why it's so easily to detect for Ukrainians, Russian spies or Russian operatives or so on. It's a matter, even I can do it. It's a matter of 2-3 seconds, really. Now, America...
Is that an offer? Is that an offer? You offer yourself as a Ukrainian spy? Is that...
That's a good one. Now, Americans really, they're not aware of Russians and their motives to operate in America and to spy, to... actually, spy is different because spies, so the either FBI or CIA, they will be dealing with that element, but they're not capable of dealing with the Facebook recruitments and operations. And Americans at large are unaware of that. So when some new friend, Robert Johnson, approaches you and saying, "Oh, I've heard about wonderful things. There will be a meeting, and there will be so many good people, and so on. I invite you personally. You will have a good time," or so on. Whatever text they're using, I don't care. So of course they're getting some success with that, and apparently in 2016 they were very successful exactly at that. And I think actually the situation in American politics to me looks like those who is so-called Trump's base, they will vote for Trump and Republicans regardless of what, whether it's Russians doing something or Hungarians, or it doesn't matter. They will vote for Republicans. Now, there are hardcore Democrats who are going to vote for Democrats just the same way. And there is a core of undecided, which is approximately, 18-20% maybe or so. So this is an animal which can go either way, and it's very difficult to work on them. And this is apparently, that's everything what will be decided. Now, you're going to come back.
I think, Sasha, though, when you refer to Trump, Trump's supporters, I think that, coming up into the 2020 election, they interviewed a lot of people in various things, and people that would come on camera who would actually say things like, "I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but I'm going to in 2020," which I will tell you that if I was American, that probably would have been what I would have done, to be honest with you, because I didn't think that the Democrats' policies were particularly strong in 2020. But I actually like Hillary Clinton, and I didn't like Donald Trump back in 2016. I didn't think he was the best guy for the job, and I thought Hillary Clinton would have been a better president. What do I know about politics? I normally get it wrong. And that's what I thought Americans were going to do. But on the flip side, there was also a lot of people that said, we voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And, we've been okay with his presidency, but he's just had this you know, the whole presidency's been mired with controversy, and he's fighting with Rosie O'Donnell, and he's fighting with Hollywood, and he's fighting with the press, and it's just this, you know, we just want things to just calm down. You know, let's just get back to some sense of normalcy. So I won't be voting for him in 2020. So I think when people have their motivations for voting for political parties, they may not be the same reasons as what we might think. Certainly in the midterm elections, I think Republicans and myself underestimated how big the abortion issue was to a big part of the electorate. But having said that, I just want to pivot a little bit here to what Medea has been advocating for. So she says that, look, the United States, you're spending 900 billion a year. We shouldn't be giving any more support over there. What we should be doing is sending an army of diplomats. Do you think that there is any possibility, any way at all, that we could stop military aid to the Ukraine and just send an army of Medeas in there, and that they would somehow be able to resolve the conflict? Do you think that would work?
It all depends what's really United States really want out of their politics. You see, the present U.S. policy was formulated in 1945 or thereabouts after Second World War. And it never wavered an inch from its policy. And this policy is basically very simple. It's power, it's a dominance in the world, which allows U.S. to prosper on all other fronts. The military is number one, but number two comes economy, the diplomacy, the culture, the everything else. But it's all based on military and very strong military. And if without that strong military, U.S. will not be as successful at all, not even close. Its economy will be going down the drain. Its diplomacy is, in fact, very poor, even with a strong military. The diplomacy of the United States is very, very poor. There are not enough qualified people to carry out the diplomacy. They don't have enough strong, qualified people with good education. They're going elsewhere. Why would they go to diplomacy? They can go on Wall Street and work on merger and acquisitions and make 10 times more money than any diplomat. And in fact, they will make a joke of a diplomat. Oh, are you a diplomat? Oh, how much money are you making so far?
Perhaps the world's great negotiators in private enterprise, because private enterprise always does things better than government, should take over the diplomatic corps. I think we've got a business idea, Sasha, for the privatization of the US diplomatic corps. We could make a bundle. Now, give us some updates on what's happening in Russia and the Ukraine, the conflict there, the invasion of Ukraine's land. Tell us what's happening. You didn't get a chance yesterday, so I think the floor is yours, and I think Mark will be back with us in a few minutes.
Okay, let's take it back a little bit and what's happened before February of 22. So Russia was getting increasingly worried that Ukraine is so much gravitating to the Western sphere of influence as NATO is concerned, European Union, and Ukraine had aspirations to become members of both. So that means that Russia's most, I would say, historically aligned and controlled at the same time, part of the former Soviet Union is becoming not just fully independent of Russia, but in fact it will get very close to the West. It will get its all anti-Russian policies and politics and everything else. And if one day Ukraine will become indeed a member of NATO, then, for example, NATO can put up the missiles close, say, around Kharkiv, city of Kharkiv, which is probably 10 minutes, if not less, fly to Moscow. So,
do you think it's realistic, Sasha, for the Ukraine to be part of NATO? Because what we've heard, months ago, I don't know what the latest comments are, but months ago, there was a lot of talk of, maybe it would be a good idea not to have Ukraine part of NATO, but NATO would keep an eye on the Ukraine.
Well,
Ukraine could make some land between the NATO countries and Russia.
Shaquille, what you're talking about happened a couple of months ago. You're right. Yeah. But what I'm talking about, the months preceding the beginning of the war of February 2022. I'm talking about this was basically orchestrated by Russian propaganda to a tremendous amount that they were, I would say, mildly successful to convince Russian people, electorate, which is not playing any role in formulating Russian politics, but still, they wanted somehow to get people on their side. So that's what they were doing the months, 2 months, 3 months before the beginning of the war. And finally, they started the war. Now, they had three very important points. Number one, that as soon as they will do it on very large scale and very quickly, will take Kyiv, say, in 3 days, and all central Ukraine for, say, 7 days. So even the West will not tolerate that, most likely. They will not have time, really, to do anything about it. So once Russia controls Kyiv and most of Ukraine, so West would have to, they will criticize Russia. They will say that it's not nice, it's not a good move on their part, or so on. But same as with Crimea, when Russians took Crimea, they did it so forcefully that US, even if they wanted to object to it and they wanted to do something about it, they just didn't have any time. And it was not on their, as one of their most important diplomatic or military or just anything.
After Crimea, we've seen an increase in tension, shall we say, between Russia and the West. Now, without blaming any individual world leader, any individual president, Obama, Biden, Trump, etc., do you think that, back if we look at the last couple of years, we saw that there was a build-up of troops in Russia near the border. We saw that there was a build-up of military equipment being moved to the border. It was clear that Russia was likely to make a move towards the Ukraine. And we all the West kind of sat back and just watched it happen. Do you think the West could have and should have done some things, at those early stages that would have averted this event from happening, this crisis from happening? And if so, what do you think we should have done?
Yes, it should have, it could have. And you know why it didn't do anything about it? Because of Ukraine, who denied all these messages from the West that invasion is almost inevitable or so on. Ukraine itself was saying that please don't meddle in our affairs, you spook businesses who are moving out of Ukraine. So please stop doing that. And Ukraine, honestly, including Zelensky himself, honestly believes that this invasion is simply impossible. They couldn't believe that in the 21st century, the one European country can attack full scale the other European country. There were skirmishes.
Sasha?
Yeah?
I'm sorry. Why? Didn't they just see what happened with the Crimea? So how could they not know that it's possible in the 21st century?
Okay, Crimea was indeed, it happened so quickly and forcefully.
On the ground, it happened quickly. What value is our military intelligence if they can't predict these things and look into the ball and see what's going on?
Well, let's come to 2014, if that's what you'd like to do. Ukraine at that time had no army, period. Not a bad army or not.
Did they need one? After they gave up the nukes, we promised we would protect them.
Well, they did believe in the protection. So they thought that under that mechanism, which is so-called Memorandum of 1994, they believed, and there were 3 signatories to that, the USA, UK, and Russia. So Russia was not only breaking their promise to protect Ukraine, but they were actually perpetrators of exactly that. So Russia is out. Furthermore,
right, agreed.
It's a so-called not even bad guy. It's a horrible guy if you want to go into that. So that leaves UK and US. And UK and US now facing a huge dilemma, what to do about this Crimea situation. And they came to the conclusion that in fact they can do really nothing about it, because very quickly when Russia invaded Crimea, they took it over and made it a part of Russia. I want to say Soviet Union. No, part of Russia. So today, if either UK or US both would attack Crimea, they would attack actual Russia, which could lead to unforeseeable consequences. So they decided to start economic sanctions, which they did, limited at that time, but at least they wanted to react somehow. And in fact, interestingly enough, that today Russia is denying that this economic sanctions to amount anything. It's not true, because from the year 2014, Russia economy started its downward movement, which is being exacerbated now. But it started in exactly 2014, when prices for oil and gas were still reasonably high, but yet their economy started to slide exactly that time. And from that point on, they were working on some kind of peace agreement of Minsk I, Minsk II, which were headed by France and Germany.
I think this is where I've criticised how we withdrew from Afghanistan. I think we did it in such a bad way. And I actually made the comments when that was happening that why should any country ever again trust the West? We've left people who jeopardise their lives to work with our nations. And
remember that Budapest Memorandum is 1994, well before you withdrew from Afghanistan, right?
I'm just saying what I said about Afghanistan just recently. And now we see that the Ukraine has signed these agreements. They've relied on the protection of both Russia and especially the West. And really, my opinion has always been that we have not done enough to support Russia. Sorry, to support the Ukraine. I'm sorry.
You're going to be quoted on that out of context forever.
They'll TikTok that bit. We have not done enough to support the Ukraine. When Russia went in there, we sort of just sat back and said, well, you better not. Well, we'll put a trade embargo on you. We'll put sanctions on you. Oh shit, we actually need your oil. Well, we'll buy your oil at a lower price. I mean, it's just been, it's been very. I think we should have done more. I don't think that we did enough in those early days. And I think the comments that we've made, Republicans made these comments as well, that, we don't want any American boots on the ground. Well, really? Because that's not
that's Biden was saying all the time, right, that we don't, there will be no American.
Republicans have been championing this idea.
Shakil, think about that. And now
there are boots on the ground.
Before you respond to that, let me just say, the assassinated Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, one of the things that he was talking about that he did get a little bit of criticism for, but for the most part, I think the very proud Japanese people were supportive of, was, look, we said we weren't really going to have a military other than for self-defense, but we're going to rely on other people. We're going to rely on these other countries. And I think, look, our behavior in World War II may not have met international standards, but look, that was a long time ago. We want to have our own military. We want to be able to protect ourselves, etc. And I happen to agree with him. I think that countries should be able to do that. Clearly, if you're a smaller country, New Zealand, for example, clearly they're going to need the assistance of Australia and other allies if something was to happen to them in order to protect them, because they're a small country. Japan by itself, I don't know how they would be able to withstand a much bigger and much more powerful country attacking them by themselves, but they certainly should have a military. Should any country ever again trust the West? Should any country ever again rely on an agreement made with our nations that, hey, we will protect you? Because we might say that today, and 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, things have changed, politics has changed, it's a different generation. Why should any country ever believe us again?
Shakil, I don't think that this is so much based on belief or trust in West. It's very practical situation where most countries would probably trust and believe into the West simply because there was no other choice available. If you don't believe in the West or United States, then what else is on the table? You want to believe in New Zealand, you want to believe in Nigeria maybe, or what you want to believe in, maybe Uruguay, or some other exotic countries. No, not really.
Unicorns. Yeah.
So this is probably the most practical choice.
Yeah.
Now, second more important thing is that I'm not trying to advocate for Ukraine why West and US should help them more or less or at all. No. What I'm talking about is this is the interest of US and the West. Not forget about Ukraine. You don't care where Ukraine is. What is it all about? Why should you help Ukraine? It's helping themselves. Help West yourself. Why? Because without putting any boots on the ground, you have very motivated, very skillful Ukrainian fighters who are opposing the most menacing country in the world, which was threatened already 3 generations with nuclear holocaust. So right now, that little Ukraine, they are putting them through. Actually, it's
Well, they're certainly weakening their.
Are you familiar with?
Let me sorry to interrupt you here, because we do have some guests that have now joined us. So I just want to add them in. So we started off the show with me saying that I'm not Steve Rao. I'm not coming from the great city of Durham. I'm not from the 8th largest state in the union. So let's actually hear from the person who is Steve Rao, who is from Durham and is from the 8th largest state in the union. Hello, world. Steve,
hey,
over to you.
Hello, world. And I'm sorry, I couldn't find the right link today, so I apologize. And I can only stay for a few minutes because I'm running late. I'm actually going back to Washington again. This is my 5th trip in a row, back to back. So I'm just getting really comfortable up there.
Brown noser.
We have some grave concerns for you.
Well, what I wanted to basically say is that I just
Shepherd wives
coming out to the MLK with Mr. McKissick yesterday. That was a really great show, and I didn't really come in prepared to talk today, but I think we need to make sure we continue to focus on Ukraine, continue to focus on the economy, where it's at, and what is the plan to get things moving in the U.S. and also globally with the energy crisis. Of course, people are really concerned about California. Quite scary how much rain they've got. A blessing in that it's helping them with the drought, but so much rain, and of course the classified documents with Biden. And I'm trying to see if there's anything nationally I've missed, but I got to run in about 2 minutes. But I just wanted to come today. I'll be back on Friday from PBS, Carolina, where I'll be doing a wrap up of the week. But just want to thank you all for welcoming in, and welcome to World Edition from the 9th largest state in the union.
Have you dropped back a bit? Have you?
From 8 to 9?
No, 8th. Yeah, we're between 8 and 9, I think. But
so you're the 8.5 largest state in the union. That's a bit. Now, who are you in competition with?
I don't know.
What's the other state that you're not
probably
sure
South Carolina, obviously Georgia. I mean, here's an issue we're dealing with that I think might be interesting for you all to talk about, or we could talk about. But the biggest challenge right now that we're having in North Carolina is that the gas tax revenue has really declined because of fuel efficient cars. And so, and then you had COVID. And so we're about 400 million in the red, and we have all these companies coming in, and this is a real problem. So we're not able to.
Steve, sorry, but why is it a problem?
Hang
on, let me finish my question. This is what I don't understand. You have people like me who actually care about the environment, who say we need to do really important environmental things. And some of that will be switching to electric vehicles and more efficient vehicles. But you're going to have to look at tax revenue when you do that. We get shot down as being climate change deniers. And now all of a sudden, guess what? Revenues have fallen because of efficient vehicles. I noticed that Tesla recently has become Australia's largest, biggest selling sedan, biggest selling vehicle. Tax revenues are going to fall. Where do we make them up? Do we just say, hey, hit the rich, let's just tax the rich some more?
Where I'm going with this, and I apologize, I had an 11:30 meeting, it just got moved, but where I'm going with this, Shaquille, and I think this actually goes into Shaquille Latimer's argument, and is that we've been focusing so much on, and I actually agree, believe it or not, as a Democrat, I completely agree with Shaquille Latimer on this. We've been talking about going to 100% renewable, 100% electric cars, 500,000 car charging stations. But here's the deal. If there's no way of taxing the electric cars on the road and the Democrats have their way, then they may very well deplete more than half or 80% of the revenue coming
Steve,
in. So,
the diesel, the regular cars, were taxing them at the pump. Why can't we tax the electric cars at the pump also? The charging
that's what we're
stations.
going to have to do. We're going to have to come up with some kind of a funding mechanism. But anyway, I got to run.
Well,
Guys. You're in good hands with
Hydrogen.
I'll be
Hydrogen.
back on Friday.
California has suggested a tax based on how many kilometers or miles, I suppose, in America that you actually travel each year. I actually tend to think that might be a good idea. I think that would make a bit more sense, that people that use the roads more are contributing more than people that don't. That seems to be okay. I don't like the idea of the government sitting here and watching what you're doing. But thank you, Steve. I think my other concern with a lot of the climate change stuff is when people say, let's get to net zero. Because net zero, to me, that just sounds like complete and utter nonsense. What that means is I'm going to go buy a private jet, but as long as I plant 1 million trees in Africa, then the net effect of my jet is zero. So therefore, hey, I'm off the hook. I'm all good.
We have to be
That's idiotic.
Guys, I got to run. I'll be back on Friday, hopefully Thursday. But I want to thank you all for being on World Edition. Sorry, it's been a crazy time, but hobnobbing up in Washington, I'll try to get us on some national news shows.
Thanks, Steve, and hopefully we will remain important enough to you to pop in now that you're hobnobbing with all of those politicians in Washington.
Thank you, guys.
Shaquille, you just highlighted the scam then of people buying offsets because they're jet versus their forest. I can't speed because my grandmother's going slower. So why does that work in the clean?
Exactly, and this is the stuff, because I hear this so often from companies. It's like it's like the airlines, and to me they're not being serious. They're doing it because they think it'll make them look good, right? And people just buy into it without thinking. So it's like, hey, you book a ticket and you're going from, I don't know, New York to Georgia or something, or you're going from Sydney to Perth here in Australia, and the airline says, well, do you want to pay an extra $8 to offset the carbon of your flight?
No.
A lot of people will go, I don't, but a lot of people will go, yeah, okay, it's good for the planet, yeah. And you go, well, actually, hang on a second, what's happening with my $8? And a lot of people go, oh, who cares? It's only $8, it doesn't really matter, right? You think, well, what's happening with the $8? And well, who knows how much of it actually is going to what it's supposed to go to? But even if all of it went, what does that mean? Does that mean that look, if instead of buying an electric car, I go out and I buy a new Bentley, right? But I get it supercharged. I get the original engine. I get extra stuff put into it, okay? And then I go, well, look, this is the fuel efficiency of this. I used to have a Mustang that I used to drive around in.
He's bragging again.
And well, I'll go into the Mustang because it's an American car. So I was driving that around. I was in my late 20s. And, there's a setting on there that you can flick. It says drag mode. And I can tell you, I was having a lot of fun. The problem was that the rated fuel efficiency of that vehicle was 10 liters per 100 kilometers. I was getting about 30 or 40 liters per 100 kilometers because I was driving it like it was meant to be driven. I was having all sorts of fun in that vehicle. So do I get to do that and then have some environmentalists say, hey, Shaquille, what about the planet that you're using, 4 or 5 times as much electricity, as much, fuel as you're supposed to? And I say, don't worry about it. I've gone and planted 500,000 trees in Ethiopia. So that's fine. That's offset my emissions because based on what they're telling us, that's exactly what's happening, right? We're just going to say, well, we did this, we're net zero, and so the planet's all in great shape. I mean, personally, I just think it's a lie. I think we've been very, very manipulated on this issue. And again, we ask what I think are reasonable questions. There's nothing wrong with going to electric vehicles in some circumstances. In fact, in a lot of circumstances, if you live in inner city New York and for some reason you drive and you're driving relatively short distances, it makes sense. Go electric, sure. But you need to make sure the infrastructure's there. You need to make sure that you can actually charge the vehicle. And if you live in New York City, you're going to make sure you can park your vehicle somewhere. And you also have to make sure that the electricity is being generated from a clean source. If it's coming from diesel, if you've got a diesel generator to charge your electric vehicle, how does that make any sense to anybody? And I'm very confused as to why the politicians are just thundering on with this. With this program. Does anybody disagree with me? Because if we don't, we should probably change to a subject where we disagree. Does anybody have an opposing view to mine on this issue?
No, I don't. I do think hydrogen is a better route to go long term. This is why hydrogen is the most available substance in the universe, right? Being the simplest molecule. They've been developing more and more efficient hydrogen generation methods. Hydrogen, it can be made safe and efficient. If the government wants to tax hydrogen, they can tax hydrogen, thereby not losing their revenue. Hydrogen is clean, absolutely clean. You don't have to recycle the batteries to the extent you do an electrical car. They're far more efficient. The cars are going to last longer with hydrogen because it's a cleaner fuel. I mean, it's just a great solution long term. I think.
Well, I tend to think, Dan, with hydrogen, there are some costs associated with it now that will probably come down over time if hydrogen is widely adopted. What I'll say to you is that I think hydrogen is probably a good idea for some of those higher load type situations where you've got a bus, a truck, where you have farming equipment, especially where the electrical engines just can't handle that sort of
load. Or you
load.
live in the West where the distances are long.
That's right.
The problem is
also if you live in cold climates.
Hydrogen. I would have to buy a hybrid if I had a hybrid before. I bought a Camry. It sucked. It wasn't all-wheel drive. In the winter, it's impossible here, and so I sold it and got I got a Ram diesel truck. Went the other way, right? But
totally the other way, Dan. They went totally
the
other way.
point is, now they have all-wheel drive hybrids that are very, very efficient, very good. 40 and 50 miles a gallon, 60 miles a gallon. And, then in the West, that is a better solution than electrical. Now, hydrogen would be even a better solution than a hybrid, provided that there was the infrastructure to support it and the prices were reasonable. I don't see manufacturing a hydrogen car being much more expensive than manufacturing a traditional vehicle.
I think
in fact, cheaper.
I think that the actual cost that I'd be concerned about is the production of the hydrogen, because that can become quite costly. What I will say is, look, I'm involved with many various organizations around the world. We do have a lot of very serious issues that are facing our planet. Now, one of them which has been brought to light, especially with the farming protests that have been going on in places like the Netherlands, which is ridiculous what they've done over there. But it has been about nitrogen. Now, having too much nitrogen out there, it's like our planet has diabetes and you got too much sugar in your bloodstream. That's what the nitrogen's doing. We don't have time to go into all of the issues, but we are seeing some really significant issues. And one of the ways that can actually help with that is seaweed, to actually eat up all of that nitrogen out of the oceans and create food for fish, so you actually get some more biodiversity and we can help to rehabilitate our waterways. That's a project that I really support. I think that's a really great idea. And it's something that we should be looking at. We should be looking at how we're allowing nitrogen to seep through into our groundwater sources, etc. We need to have these really important conversations and really important things. And reasonable people will sometimes disagree. The other thing that I think is a really significant issue is the type of fuel that's used in shipping. If you have a look at the kind of fuel that everyone talks about, which is jet fuel, it's a very clean, high-grade fuel. If you have a look at what they put in ships, it's the sort of sledgy, grotty, horrible fuel, and it is very, very polluting, not just to our atmosphere, but also to our waterways. And there's an old saying that what you take out of the ocean will find a way to take back from you. And I think we should remember that. So I think these are really important conversations. I think that when politicians put other things into it, like we've talked about, Mark, we've just had a conversation now for 15, 20 minutes about renewable energy and solutions and, what could work and what couldn't. This is why I have such a strong reaction to groups like the Sierra Club, and why I also asked Georgia Romani, who I think is a wonderful person, who I think, has got such great ideas. If you want to talk about animal rights, stick in your lane and stick to animal rights. She said, yeah, but it's all interconnected. Yeah, maybe it is. Certainly when the climate changes, animals are going to have their habitats affected and that sort of stuff. Of course, we need to pay attention to that. But stay in your lane. Stick to what you're actually interested in. Stick to what you're passionate about. Don't start telling me that abortion has something to do with the climate change. Don't start telling me that disparities between the LGBT community or the Black community or any other minority community and the main community is somehow some factor in the debate between what we should do in the future. We clearly are heading towards a place where renewable energy, clean energy is what we want for our future. And I think it'll be the next great big jump up that we'll have. If we can harness electricity and create it in a way that is cheap to the environment, the opportunities that we will have will be huge. When electricity first came out, look at all the companies that started up in those eras. So I think we have an amazing opportunity there in front of us. We just need to get the politics out of it, and let's just focus on achieving what we want to achieve. But I will leave the last word to you, Mark.
No, great conversation. I was actually listening, even though I was having all kinds of technology issues, and all in that line was actually going over to the Cultural Arts Center that I work at and found out that I didn't have to be there because the veterans didn't show up, and I set off an alarm. What fun. It's been an interesting day this morning and all in that fun and the waves. But as I was going back and forth and listening to the conversation, I was going like, wait a minute. Lee Newton Road it sounded like AOC. This can't be possible, and all in those lines. And I was even hearing some of the things that Shaquille was saying. I was going like, this is the liberal side of Shaquille, and all in that space. And I don't know if y'all saw the comment that I made earlier, but I've decided that Shaquille Latimer has a new career. He's definitely done a lot in the hedge fund space, in the racing of everything else. But I have decided that he is the new Walter Cronkite. So definitely,
there we go. I could have a career change.
That's right.
High praise.
Yes. So definitely you did a great job sitting there in the hot seat and all that and leading the conversation. So I thought that was a amazing job. And Sasha was also giving us some great insight as well. So it's always appreciated that. And Dan, you are always giving insight from different points of view. And even though you come off as a conservative, you're one of those conservatives that is willing to listen to everybody. Because I actually heard you listening to even some of the other folks. You do give some of that little sarcastic.
Mark, there's a name for that. Years ago, we called them compassionate conservatives.
Right, exactly.
Now, I do want to bring one more thing up to the panel, and I'll leave you guys to this note. So I talked about actually prior to COVID, and then obviously I didn't come onto these shows until COVID had already started. But I talked about the fact that there is only 4 manufacturers of penicillin in the world. Mark, Sasha's got some comments for you backstage. Okay. There's 4 penicillin manufacturers in the world. There's one very small one in Austria, and there is 3 in China. I don't have a problem with the fact that they're in China. That's not the issue that I have. The issue that I have is that they're all in one country. That if there is ever a geographic issue, there's an earthquake, there's a tsunami, there's some sort of issue. A pandemic. The world's supply of penicillin diminishes. Now, as people are aware, I'm going to Africa in a few weeks. I've had 2 vaccines. I'm taking them off now. I've had 2 vaccines on this arm and one here. What I was not able to do was I wasn't able to get the one of the vaccines because there's a worldwide shortage, and it was cholera. Sorry, is the word I was looking for. So there's a worldwide shortage of cholera vaccines. How can this happen? And nobody's actually talking about it. So I really think that we need to start focusing on. Yes, we've had a globalized economy, and that has been incredible for us. And we've made all sorts of leaps and bounds. But I think it's also time for us to start focusing on making sure that our own countries are resilient because we have manufacturing capabilities and we have the ability to produce supplies. We just shouldn't be relying on 1 or 2 countries to provide all these sorts of goods. We need to have a bit more of a backup framework for things.
Definitely.
One thing I need to point out before we go is 90% of people who died in the United States were 65 and older. That coincides very closely with the retirement age and the Social Security age and the Medicare age. What a convenient truth.
Conspiracy of the day.
We're gonna get ourselves well, not we. You're gonna get yourself fact checked, Dan, and then we're gonna be in trouble again.
No, that number is true.
The number's true. That is right. He's not saying there's a causative, but it is coincidental.
Yeah, and the same is true worldwide and in China, other places. That reduces the cost of Social Security, Medicare, everything else, because we had 1 million people dying in the United States, 900,000 were seniors. That's a big impact.
So let's wrap the show up. Mark Lee, I'll leave you with one of Walter Cronkite's famous sayings: "There is no such thing as a little freedom. You are either all free or you are not free."
That sounds good. And I thought you were going to leave with, and that's the way it is. So on that note, we get out of here.